Japan Up Close.
So hello and welcome to this webinar hosted by Japan Up Close, taking a new look at Japanese culture and locality through international eyes. As local traditional crafts and nature in Japan attract greater international attention, how does the dissemination of Japanese culture from local to global contribute to dialogue in the international community? In order to promote a better understanding of this issue, Japan Up Close has invited experts from North America, South America, and Europe to discuss. There will be a Q&A session toward the end, so viewers are invited to please submit their questions via the Zoom chat function. I will now turn over the discussion to our moderator for this webinar, Mr. Alex Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I think, will be a rather extraordinary session because one of the things that is exceptional about Japan is its crafts, its magnificent variety and depth of technique and of spirituality and aesthetic quality. There's really nothing like it, I think, in the world, and certainly not in Asia. And it's one of the reasons why people come to Japan, because of this richness, whether it's lacquer and ceramics and textiles and many infinite variety. Today we had a traditional gardener come around to my house here in Kyoto, and I've lived in Japan for decades, and I learned more about a simple thing like how to put a piece of stone into the earth. And it turns out that they've been doing it in a certain way since the Edo era. So these are the sorts of things you learn when you're involved in the crafts of Japan. And today we have three remarkable panelists, all of who have quite exceptional careers in this field. We're going to start out with Steve Bimel, who happens to be an old friend of mine, and who has been active in Kyoto for many, many years, and who first came to Japan in 1970, and so has quite a career in this country. He founded at a very early period in the early 90s, a travel company called Esprit, which used to still, I think, brings travelers to Japan and takes them on cultural tours, not your normal tour where you just go to the famous tourist places, but really takes them deeper than the average traveler would do. And I think that Steve was one of the first to really break ground in that area. He later, and what's really involved with today's program is in 2018, he founded a Japan Traditional Craft Revitalization, which focuses on traditional craft. And Steve travels all over Japan. He takes tours to pottery workshops and many other kinds of crafts, and is trying to get young people involved, has really devoted himself to this issue. And we now would like to ask Steve to give his presentation. Thank you. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and great to see you again after so many years.
Yeah.
So my question for everyone is, what is Japan's best kept secret? My answer is Japan's best kept secret is Japan. And I prepared a little bit of an online presentation for you. So if I can, here we go. So I've prepared a few slides to exactly tell you what I mean by Japan's best kept secret is Japan. Japan is, as Alex was saying, is probably the last powerhouse of master craftsmanship. And when I say master craftsmanship, I mean crafts that have been passed down from generation to generation, sometimes even up to 1,000 years. The world does not understand the breadth and depth of this body of culture. And I don't think most Japanese understand it either. There are 1,300 traditional Japanese crafts. 10,000 years ago, there were baskets in Japan. Today, we have baskets in Japan. 9,000 years ago, lacquerware in Japan. Today's lacquerware. bark, fiber cloth, mulberry, linden, elm, banana leaf from 7,000 years ago, and banana leaf weaving from Okinawa today. 300 BC, the Japanese Bronze Age, and Hanyasuda's bronze statuary today, sculpture today. Earthenware 4,000 years ago, stoneware 800 years ago, stoneware today, the same methodology. 450 years ago, the first raku bowl. 15 generations in the same family of the same raku family. Kichizaemon is making bowls like this, raku bowl. 400 AD, silk sericulture comes from Korea. Today, brides can wear uchikake wedding garments like this, and rarefied dyeing by some of the finest dyers in the world. Indigo dyeing 1,500 years ago. Fine art dyeing in the 21st century. Indigo dyeing. 1,400 years ago, swords were produced in Japan. 800 years ago was the golden age of sword making, the finest swords the world had ever seen and have seen since. And we have cutlery made from the same methodology today. Buddhist statuary, 1,400 years ago. The golden age, the Kamakura period of Japanese statuary, wooden statuary, of Asian statuary, and today. Buddhist architecture, 1,400 years ago. Highly Japanicized by 500 years ago, and 21st century Buddhist architecture in Tokyo today. Washi introduced 1,400 years ago from Korea, and architectural installation of washi today. Hikihaku is gold leaf affixed to washi paper, cut 0.5 millimeter wide, and then woven into silk to form luxurious nishijin obi. Kutani ware from 1700, and today in the same district, the pinnacle of overglaze methodology. So if you take most of the crafts in the whole world and you put them on the right side, Japan probably has more than most of the world combined. This is a true powerhouse and Japan's best kept secret. Nobody knows this. So what's the problem? The problem is I'm probably the only one. Alex is actually another one of these people. I'm out in the street and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, fire. The world, and most of the world and Japan doesn't realize that this body of culture will likely be gone mostly be gone in the next 5 years. It's a meltdown. We started Japan Craft 21 and to somehow do something. Because I couldn't sit by and watch this happening. Like it was too painful to watch it happen. I had to get active and do something. So I gathered a bunch of friends of mine. Everyone chipped in a little bit of money. And so our mission is to identify problems, to create strategies, and to take action. Very little talk, but a lot of action. So first problem, what was the problem? Scattered, scant, inconsistent information, not even a complete list of the crafts in Japan. Nobody knows what's going on. And so our idea was to put together a research program. And so we started finding out things. 1979, 300,000 master craftsmen. 2010, 90,000. 2022, 50,000. And 2028, we expect about 20,000 left of master craftsmen in a powerhouse. Give you an example, lacquerware plummeted 80% in sales in just 20 years. 1990, there were 1,200 weavers in Kyoto, and there are 50 left. So what is the reason for this? What is the reason for the decline? And that's another problem. Everyone has a simplistic answer. Oh, teenagers don't like this, and people don't like that, and this is this, and this is that. And we had to have a well thought out analysis. So we began to do that, putting together the opinions of a lot of people, and came together with this list. And the list is much bigger than this, but I don't have time to share it all with you now. 1, disappearing mentors. Years ago, company owners nationwide, merchants and mid-sized business owners were cultural mentors. They practiced tea ceremony. They were significant craft collectors. This was a huge market. And now they play golf. two-generation families. It used to be grandparents would live in the home with the children, and they would teach them culture. That doesn't exist anymore. Buddhist temples, weavers, and carpenters, they're mom and pop businesses, and they have to fight. They're fighting corporate business, and they're losing. They can't compete with the PR of these big companies. So, problem: no young carpenters trained in joinery. Our answer: we started a Sunday school for working carpenters to teach them joinery, and we've already graduated. We've finished 2 18-month courses, and we've graduated 12 young carpenters who can now do master joinery. Same thing with young plasterers, didn't know how to make mud bamboo walls, and now we've graduated 5 people for that. Young gardeners, we're just finishing a year class. Young gardeners are not being taught, unless they work for a large gardening firm, they're not being taught these rarefied techniques in garden building. 70, 80, 90-year-old genius dyers with no one to take over. And most of them, we've yanked them out of retirement. We've started an apprentice program. We've paying the living expenses for 3 apprentices to go from door to door to study from these people full time. Problem: the world's powerhouse of master crafts, but nobody knows about it. So our answer is social media. We're pumping out images of beautiful Japanese master crafts. We have regular free of charge online presentations drawing fairly large crowds, 150 people a couple times a month, and it's a growing audience. We have about 2,000 people on our mailing list, and we're creating a very active community. Problem: everything's a craft. What this person is doing is a craft. A 2 meter tall celadon vase is a craft. This doesn't work. We defined what crafts are. So this is a hobbyist, and this is just a craft. These are very nice cups. They're 3 or 4 or 5,000 yen, $50. You could buy these in any country in the world. You can go to school maybe for 6 months and learn how to make these things. They're crafts. They're not master crafts that have been passed down for generation to generation. But this is a master artisan craft, and this is a master artist craft. So we have 4 categories. Problem: who do we help first? This country, the craft world, is riddled with problems. So we didn't know who to help first. So we started a contest to find the best, brightest, most passionate, most motivated people. We have this extraordinary team of judges. And so we started an idea contest. Who has the best idea to revitalize a craft? And our first-year winner was this young man. He runs a cooperative for rural revitalization, sustainable forestry, craftsman training, and community education. He's also a lacquer dealer, so he knows lacquer backwards and forwards. So we gave him $50,000 US to start a new business to make lightweight, urushi-coated wooden surfboards, which outperform and outlast chemical surfboards, and using mother of pearl, using all kinds of wonderful Japanese inlaid woodwork. Our 2022 first place winner, her family creates extraordinary hand-planed furniture, no sandpaper at all, just beautiful furniture with crocheted washi paper cushions, their own invention. So we're funding 3 apprentices for them so they can expand this. They could train more people to make this more mainline. So we have these 20 wonderful people from about 15 different craft genres. This represents every dot on this circle is a different name, and the colored lines show all the things these people have in common. So the people who do rural revitalization have one color, people who do lacquer have one color, woodworking have another color, weaving and dyeing. They have so much in common. They hardly knew each other before the contest. And now we're bringing them together so they can create a support group. They can support each other. They can really build on the energy that's created. Problem: we have all these great crafts, but the world doesn't know about them. We have these great artists, these craftspeople. For example, this is tin and urushi lacquer, and it creates this extraordinarily beautiful silver finish that's durable and really beautiful, and it's wonderful for restaurants because it's so durable. So our solution for that was to create high profile exhibitions, and we're creating an online showcase gallery where we tell the story of each of these people, and we show the magnificent work they do. And this is an exclusive online gallery that we're going to be sharing with artists, with architects, with museum curators, with gallery owners around the world. Some of the work of this is another furniture maker in our group. So these stories have to be told. This is a Sashimono, the work. He's one of the finest woodworkers in Japan. You know, nobody knows who he is. He's just amazing guy, just amazing. Potter, got a great potter. This is a mother of pearl surfboard. I mean, this is a museum piece. This is carved wood, ancient Ainu pattern, tin and urushi. We have a mounter, a scroll mounter, who's now making architectural forms. This is a drop ceiling made out of washi paper. And he also does these wonderful panels for installation in contemporary buildings. This is silk dyed with sumi ink and oyster shell dye. A master artist. He's like in his 80s. He's one person. He has an apprentice. And this is 2 layers of sheer silk. This is a kimono. And this is a banana leaf motif using oyster shell dye. So that's my presentation. Please join us and please help us put out this fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's an incredibly insightful presentation, first of the quality and the depth of the master crafts of Japan. And by the way, I was quite struck by your definition, which I'd never thought of consciously myself, of the difference between just plain crafts and master crafts. And of course, master crafts is what we're talking about. These skills have been passed down for many of them centuries. And there also is another thing that you point out that I've learned very much because I collect old scrolls. And the interlacing between all the different things. There's a person that does paper and a person that does textiles and a person that does the glue. You know, there used to be in Kyoto a shop that just sold glue, you know, and they
in the wooden part, the wooden top and the bottom of the scroll and the kumihimo of the cord.
Yeah. Precisely, and then the little metal fittings, and there was people who just did this, and they did things of which really the world knows not of. So, what troubles me though, as I go around, and you of course have seen so much of this, is that many of these issues have to do with the trouble has a lot to do with simply the loss of market. Modern Japanese don't use these things. They're quite happy to have plastic plates in their homes. They're not looking, really, they're not looking for ceramics or lacquer. They don't wear kimono. You know, the lifestyle has changed so drastically that the interest in owning such things has really declined. And I would say that one of the big problems that what you've managed to do is to get these wonderful young people who have the desire and who are eager to learn these secrets, but then who's going to buy it? How have you?
Great question. We thought a lot about this. Number one, we don't have to convert the entire world to this. If we can increase 1 or 2% if we can increase 1 or 2% of sales in some of these areas, 3 or 4%, if we could convince 1% of the population of Japan to wear a kimono once a month, that would probably keep Nishijin weaving district going 24 hours a day. So we don't have to convince everyone. And I found from my research and from my anecdotal research that so many people are amenable to this. So many people are really concerned and really want to be involved. They just need a path. They need a way to enter, to participate. And I have to say something about marketing. If somebody can sell a pair of torn Levi's for $150 to 500 million people in the world, can't we sell 1,000 more kimono a year? I mean, it's just ludicrous. If we could convince people to buy, with all due respect, rags for $150 to $200, I don't see how it could be difficult to sell things of extraordinary quality to a few more people.
Which kind of leads me to my next question to you, which is, I have the feeling that some of these crafts are really going to be saved by international recognition. For example, Japanese iron kettles, which the Japanese kind of stopped using, but then the Singaporeans and Taiwanese fell in love with them. They buy them like crazy. You go to various kinds of crafts shops and so on in Kyoto and other places, and you see this beautiful kettle work, which is quite remarkable in its own right, and had kind of stopped selling. It's probably still stopped selling to the Japanese, but the foreigners are buying it. And another one is the bamboo, the very incredible artistic bamboo baskets.
Yes, right.
Which were recognized.
90% is sold abroad.
Yes. So that's another issue, is that I have a feeling that, especially when you think of the theme of today's event, we're really talking about the appeal of Japan in the world. What do you feel about that as the international market for these crafts?
The international market for these crafts is enormous. I'm just thinking of something. Everyone says no one would wear wooden clogs anymore. I think that if they were marketed properly, that would be an international craze. I mean, wooden shoes that are this high off the ground, that are comfortable. That's about as cool as you can get. I mean, if you could convince people to wear torn clothes, you can convince them to wear something that's very, very, it's very cool. So yes, the international market, if people just knew, I come from Los Angeles. I grew up in LA, and I came, we were eating off of Melmac dishes, and I came to Japan. I could not believe the depth and of the beauty of the soul in things that people were making. And if people could just taste that, 1% of the world could taste that, Japan would be working 24 hours a day producing crafts.
I think the good news is that is starting to happen, and I think that the tourism boom of the last 10 years or so, as we know, Japan went from 8 million a year just about 15 years ago to 30 million right before COVID, and of course it dropped, but it'll come back. It's already coming back.
Coming back, yeah. And
it's going to double, and we're going to be 60 million pretty soon. And those people, a certain percentage of them do. For example, the Asians have been buying things like the iron kettles, but the Westerners discover things like lacquer and ceramics. And so I have a feeling that the tourists that come to Japan are the new community for these crafts.
And so it's really important that these people have a proper education, because there's a big difference between a $10 lacquer bowl and a $100 lacquer bowl. And it's very fairly priced. You get what you pay for, but it's not visible to the eye. And so there's a lot of education that we're trying to promote, but there's a lot more. The great Dento Koge traditional craft show twice a year, Takashima in Kyoto. Even before COVID, there were thousands of foreigners walking on the street. I would go to the most extraordinary craft exhibition of the year. I was the only non-Asian in the room. Every time, I've never seen another non-Asian. Nobody knows about it.
It's true. It's not really the PR on this needs work, and it's actually, I think, Japan's gift to the world. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world and find fabulous temples and ruins and whatever. Nowhere are you going to find crafts of this type. So it's so important, but the word is starting to get out, but hasn't quite. Do you have some idea how to do that PR?
Well, as I said, we're creating this platform so that people abroad, designers, people who make things, high-end things especially, can see the methodology, the craftsmanship talent here, and they can start ordering things. They can start having things made here. So that's one way that we can really bring create jobs for young people. There's a problem here. There are a lot of really beautiful, simple things that are made in China and Southeast Asia that don't take they don't take centuries of methodology, but they're beautiful things. And they're coming to Japan and they're being sold as, Japanese things, little brushes, little bamboo things. And the Japanese can't make something to sell for 4,000 yen that takes 6 days to make. I mean, it's just impossible. So we have to focus on what's going to be practical for to make a living in this society. You can no longer make wooden things for lacquer for $3 or 300 yen. It just doesn't work. So we have to. It has to be financially viable.
Yes, and you have to really educate people, and there is a world in Japan and internationally, I believe, who do seek that level of quality and can afford it. So you just need to somehow reach them.
And yes, and that's we're very tiny. So we have a few hundred people here, a few hundred people there, but we have to start speaking about tens of thousands of people. And
can I ask you one more question, which since we've got two Americans, you and me, talking here, old timers in Japan, why is it that an American did this? Why isn't there, maybe there is a Japanese group doing it and we don't know about it, but why did it turn out that way?
I don't know. I think well, let me say this, that most of our original members were foreigners, but non-Japanese, but we have most of our volunteers, our donors are mostly foreigners, our volunteers are mostly Japanese. So Japanese people want to do this. I don't see, in terms of leadership, I don't know. It's something in the Japanese DNA that's, this is what I'm told. I've been told this by dozens and dozens of people without exaggeration. It has to be a foreigner to do this. Only a foreigner can do this. And I don't know if that's true or not, if that's just a meme or, but people say that Japanese don't, Japanese people this is a culture based on modesty, and to get out and brag about how great you are, it's just not part of the Japanese DNA. It takes, somebody from the outside saying, look at this is sensational. You've been doing it for a lifetime. I've been doing it for a lifetime. And, it's when I introduced Japanese craftspeople to Westerners, they're very, very humble. And it's like, I have to step forward and say, this is the best in the world. This is the only person in the world that could do this. This took 20 years to learn. They don't do that for themselves. And I think that's just part of the beauty of Japan, is that they're modest, really humble, beautiful people. And it takes a loudmouth like me to scream.
What about the government? Is the Japanese, you hear about these initiatives by the government, but somehow I don't feel that it amounts to much, but maybe there's more going on that I don't know about.
Well, the government seems to be doing a lot. I see a lot of programs, a lot of funding, a lot of this, a lot of that. I don't know. It's the numbers that we went from 300,000 people 40 years ago to possibly 20,000 craftspeople in the next 5 years. Something's not working. So what we're doing is really out of the box. We're doing things differently. We have a contest where there are a lot of contests that give prizes. Our contest begins the day after the award ceremony. We don't give one yen out without a reason. We have to see where all this money is going. We have to collaborate with the winners to use the best use of the money. We have to see progress. We just don't hand out prizes. So, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but, I see a lot of exhibitions, a lot of people getting funding for this and this and this. I don't see a lot of progress. It takes someone from the outside with fresh eyes to do things, because I think in any bureaucracy that, any country in the world, the bureaucracy has a problem,
Yes.
has problems.
Another issue that where I think the government could play a role, but doesn't, it has to do with lifestyle, because let's face it, if people don't wear kimono, you can't sell kimono. And if people don't have a use for lacquer, you can't sell lacquer. And one of the ways that you can impact that is if embassies used lacquer and people wore kimono, and if government bureaucrats wore kimono. I mean, our mayor here in Kyoto does insist on wearing kimono. So it does happen, but of course everybody else in the city office wears Western clothes. But if they really did wear kimono, it would start to make a difference, and not cheap imported Chinese kimono that they're the tourists wear, but real kimono made in Kyoto. And I think that would have an impact. But sadly, I feel that the government doesn't understand that there's a lifestyle issue, and the government could take a leading role if they wanted to.
I can't, if you could underline what you said 50 times, it wouldn't be enough. It's like, now the kimono industry in Kyoto is basically in meltdown. There's very little left. But 20 years ago, when the kimono industry was a major industry and it was declining, every single person in the city hall should have been wearing a kimono. Yeah. Even in the Nishijin district where they make kimonos, the staff didn't wear kimono. They didn't wear even Japanese like wafuku. They were wearing these looked like a Pierre Cardin bank uniforms. I mean, it was so if everybody wore a kimono in the government, you see people in kimono on the streets everywhere. It would really catch on.
Also cultural figures. I think that if you could get leading artists, people of that sort to really wear the kimono and have fun with it, and this is another issue maybe later in our talk. I have actually many more questions for you, and I'm sure our audience has more. But for the moment, let's move on to our.
Just one 30-second thing to say.
Yeah.
One of our winners is honestly the equivalent. She's a kimono producer. She's the equivalent of Anna Wintour and Coco Chanel. She's extraordinary, and we are starting to promote her. She will turn the tide. She's got the sensibility of a genius.
Wonderful. Because one of the things, just a little twist, adding to what you've just said, I spend a certain amount of the year in Thailand. And one of the things that happened up in Chiang Mai, where it was all dying out, is that the local really cool people, artists, musicians, whatever, started to kind of bring back the local Chiang Mai clothing. And they were very wacky about it. And they wore all kinds of funny combinations. And sometimes it was modern, and sometimes they had a little Chinese touch or whatever. But it was the emphasis was Chiang Mai materials, right? What happened is the weaving came back, the silk came back, people started wearing it, it was considered cool. And so that's yet another area where I think Japan, if that could come back, people would be buying and using these things.
Well, let's put our name list together, let's have lunch, and we'll call all our friends. All our cool friends.
All our cool friends, and get them to put on their kimono. So I'd like to now turn to Sylvia Sasaoka from Brazil. And one of the things that, of course, is special about Brazil is its relationship with Japan, in that there was a huge immigration from Japan and many Brazilians of Japanese descent. And so there's actually a close bond between Brazil and Japan. And Sylvia has been very active in crafts. She has a PhD in design and a Master of Design from the State University of Sao Paulo. She's been curating projects for 35 years in Brazil. And she researched Mingei traditional folk crafts. And by the way, this word Mingei, I'd like to just stop and talk a little bit about before Sylvia gives her talk. Mingei, which means literally people's crafts, was kind of rediscovered in the 1930s by a group of Japanese and foreigners who traveled around in Japan and realized that there were these ancient crafts that had been there for hundreds of years, but because they weren't fancy things of high polish, they were more rough, they were more what's the word, more rustic, that they hadn't been valued. And so they said, wait a minute, the way that they made this kind of knife, that's so beautiful, and there's an incredible skill in it. Or the way they made one of these really kind of rough round pots, that too has this incredible history. And so they started to focus on those things. And that's what we now call minge, and it's become kind of an established word in the Japanese craft world. So maybe Sylvia can talk a little bit about that. She produced a documentary called In Search of the Folk Crafts of Japan, and she's been very much involved in bamboo. And Japanese bamboo work is really very special. There's so many different categories and varieties, whether it's lanterns, baskets, everything down to the tea scoops, that are made out of bamboo. And Sylvia has been active in the Takiakari Bamboo Lantern Festival. Take is bamboo and akari means basically a light or lantern, and is involved in sustainable development through bamboo production. So Sylvia, will you tell us a little more about what you've been doing?
Yes, I'm going to share the presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Greetings from Brazil. I would like to thank you all for attending this event and the Japan Up Close editorial team for inviting me to this webinar. I'm very happy to participate and collaborate with my experience in this event. I will start talking about my professional experience, and I have been working for over 35 years in dealing with a great diversity of handicrafts from different states of Brazil, around Brazil. And I have designed projects to create opportunities by promoting the integration among designers and craft communities. And afterwards, I focused my PhD in bamboo as a tool to work with social design. Oh, sorry. So here today, I will try to answer the two questions that were addressed to me. How the bamboo crafts industry is perceived in Brazil, and how traditional Japanese crafts should be promoted abroad. First of all, I would like to introduce a picture of bamboo in Brazil. We have one of the largest native bamboo forests on the planet, and we have a great diversity of native species and genera. However, when it comes to a bamboo culture, it's still perceived by Brazilians as a material of very little value. It's an unknown material yet. In addition, bamboo is not even listed in our national craft catalog as a Brazilian raw material nor a national handicraft. In this slide, I present two aspects of traditional bamboo craft in Brazil. One is the Kaigang indigenous basketry, and the other one is a farming use basketry. The Kaigang basketry reveal great technical skills, but yet today, most of these crafts are not recognized by society as for their traditional value. And they end up selling on the streets of their own towns and cities. And the craft for farming use. This basket weaving technique used in farming has its origin in the indigenous tradition, but they are mostly rough-made with less technical domain compared to indigenous basketry. And they are sold in agricultural shops and also in farmhouses. Here I present three groups of most popular bamboo crafts we can find at local craft fairs and online stores. One is utilitarian items, jewelry, spoons, usually are made by individual or community craft makers. Two, these bamboo furniture are also handmade, but in a large-scale production in southern Brazil. The products are delivered onto trucks to sell in craft fairs, on the roads and on the streets. And three, these modern bamboo crafts has no bark, of bamboo bark, and they are machine finished and produced in a large scale, but few companies such as Tal Bamboo that make them. And they are widely accepted in internet sales. But there are two big challenges for bamboo crafts makers in Brazil. One, there is a historical and cultural disadvantage in relation to wooden products. Two, there is a big competition of bamboo products imported from China. And this graphic on the right presents a survey of utensils from China in Brazil in 2006. In this slide, I want to show that despite the challenges, there are some outstanding Brazilian bamboo designers artisans with national and international recognition. They are Álvaro Abreu, Marcelo Maia, Lúcio Ventania, and Paulo Bustamante. These designers artisans have reached a standard of excellence, and they participated in several exhibitions, and they sell their products at trade shows and interior design stores. And this slide shows one of the most promising markets in Brazil for bamboo craftsmanship. In general, when it's applied in interior design and architecture, the bamboo craft market in Brazil is not based on tradition. It depends a lot on trends. Currently, interest in bamboo grows because it is associated with sustainability. Here, the company Bambu Carbono Zero and the organization Ser Bambu by Lúcio Ventania are exponents in bamboo crafts for architecture. So here, here I show few conclusions of bamboo scenario in Brazil. As for the raw material, there is a lack of bamboo plantations for large-scale application, and market is also still very limited. As for bamboo craft makers in general, there is a lack of know-how regarding bamboo technical professionalization, and there is a lack of proper equipment for bamboo, which makes handling very difficult. As for scientific research with bamboo, the research are mostly focused on engineering and agricultural sciences, and less on design, architecture, or other studies that direct to the development of a bamboo culture in Brazil. And this is a survey of bamboo research labs in Brazilian universities I did in 2021. So here we see there is much to explore about the development of a bamboo culture in the country, even about innovation and technology in the improvement of artifacts. And now answer the question, how traditional Japanese crafts should be promoted abroad? By focusing on the craftsman making process much more than on the final product itself, such as preparation of raw materials, tools used in production, assembly of parts, and by promoting the experience of being part of the creation in making process. Here I want to show an example of this experience. I present a successful cultural exchange program accomplished in Brazil, which I coordinated in 2020. And this project was sponsored by Japan Foundation and hosted by São Paulo State University, Unesp. We brought members of Chikaken Group, Japanese bamboo designers from Kumamoto, to work with local community and university students. Together, we developed the first Bamboo Lantern Festival in Brazil. And since then, other organizations in Brazil have requested to invite the Takiakari Festival around the country. And according to interviews with Brazilian participants of this festival, we understand that the Takiakari Festival aroused the enthusiasm for Japanese craftsmanship, especially for their know-how, technical skills, and using the proper tools. And it reinforced the work on bamboo that existed before and led to develop a local bamboo culture with a great influence from Japanese culture. And this is the Takiakari Festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are fascinating bamboo artworks, aren't they, that they've made these lanterns. A couple things I wanted to ask you. First, on this Mingei question. One of the things that the people who really discovered Mingei and talked about it and wrote about it was that they took things like those bamboo baskets that you showed that are not technically developed, and they're very basic and kind of crude, and they said, this is beautiful. Rustic is beautiful. What is there any way that, for example, in kind of minimalist modern interiors, it might be that those very Mingei rustic looking things might work? Is there any appreciation of that, or does that have any, is there any sense that there's some value to something like a farmer's basket?
Yes, there are some projects, development of design of products, gathering the designers or even shop owners that they order to these artisans to develop in a modern, look. But it's not very much, you know, as we have to disseminate more these bamboo skills and bamboo material as a culture behind. We have this indigenous, the only tradition that used to use bamboo are the indigenous people. And it's we are in development of this, to recognize these skills, to recognize this value, and then people get to know their creation.
Do you find that, for example, the very, very finely woven, very abstract, almost sort of abstract artworks that the modern Japanese basket people are doing, have there been shows of that kind of thing in Brazil? You know, it's when there was a big basket show, I think at the Met in New York, and boom, you know, that put it, or maybe, no, it was Asia Society, and that just put it on the map, and suddenly all the wealthy collectors wanted a Japanese sort of modern, very contemporary bamboo artwork. Has there been any interest in that, or is that the sort of thing?
Yes. In 2006, 2017, I guess, the Japan House in São Paulo City was launched with the first exhibition on bamboo. It was a very beautiful, beautiful exhibition, and they were very successful in the city. Many people came to see, and but people recognized this Japanese bamboo craft. But mostly of the people who attend exhibitions and galleries in Brazil, they get to know these Japanese traditional crafts, but 99% of the Brazilian people, they do not attend these cultural centers. So they mostly get to know the news by media. So I think that the widespread popularization of traditional Japanese crafts in the whole country should be through interactive events, festivals, such as workshops to make Japanese and Brazilians work together with artisans. And then, well, like Japan House did this during exhibitions, they promoted workshops, but the country is so big, and a very little part of the population can attend this kind of exhibitions. So it would be very interesting to widespread, to more people get to know the Japanese crafts in Brazil.
But you mentioned that your Takiakari Festival, that other universities now wanted to do it.
Yes,
so it's something that can really, do you think this is something, maybe universities are the right sort of venue for this?
Yes, I think the university and the university invite the local communities, and then like Takiakari Festival, we gathered the whole town to inside the universities, and people were really amazed, and it was on television, so many people got to see it, and I believe this is a good way to widespread this knowledge. And
yeah. Although it's not really mastercraft, one of the areas where bamboo's had kind of a big comeback in Japan is night lighting. And they do these amazing things at Japanese temples in Kyoto and other places where they use sliced bamboo and they put candles in them and they create these nighttime scenarios, and they open them at night. And people do very creative, I mean, basically your takiakari is a kind of a very advanced, elaborate form of that, right?
yes.
Is there maybe more room for that, the bamboo as lighting, really?
Yes, yes. I think there is this magical atmosphere helped a lot to touch the people, for sure. And then we invited the Nikkei community of Taiko, and we launched the light of the lantern together with this Taiko Performance. So it was very touching for the whole community here.
Can I ask you one more question that connects to Japan in another way? One of the big problems that Japanese craftsmen have is they have these unbelievable skills, the techniques and the polish and the perfection, but the objects that they have been making are not used by modern Japanese. And so there's been now a movement to, for example, instead of making just a lacquer rice bowl, let's make a lacquer coffee cup, right? Things that people use in their modern homes. Has there been any movement, for example, with the indigenous bamboo people who are used to, they have these skills, but they're making baskets that maybe modern people in cities don't need? Could they use those skills to make a different form, a different kind of object that fits the modern world?
Yes, for sure. It has been done for some designers. specialized on these traditional indigenous skills, and they work together with them. And they have the connection with the interior design market, so it can help them to keep doing.
To sell. Have they been able to actually sell those, do you think, or is it?
Yes, yes. It's still not very much, but it's a development.
But looking more to the impact of Japan, which is pretty broad in all of these areas. What about the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Brazilians who have lived in Japan, and then many of them now go back to Brazil? Do they bring some interest in these things with them, or are you able, for example, to use their translation skills? Is there some way, because Brazil has this incredible, really unique relationship with Japan, any way to use them as a bridge to make Japanese sensibilities more comprehensible to the Brazilians? Do they play a role or not?
Oh, yes, for sure. There are many, it's the largest Nikkei population in the world we have in Brazil. And they are very strong in aesthetic field, like design, architecture, and I think, is this the question you did?
Well, my question was.
Sometimes if you can speak slower, please.
The question was a bit long. No, my question is basically, so many tens of thousands of Brazilians went to Japan and have been working there in the last few decades, right? And many of them, have now moved back to Brazil, right? And so those people, do they play any role to kind of bridge Japan and Brazil, the people that worked in Japan and then came back to Brazil?
Yes, as very large amount of Brazilians that went to work in Japan and come back to Brazil, they were related to agricultural work. Yes, and I think some come back and help their parents in agricultural field, and other ones come back to start their own business in cities. Yes, I think the relationship with the Japanese culture, such as crafts or art, I don't see, I don't realize very much this connection when they come back.
That feels like a little bit of a wasted resource. It might be good if you can get, I don't know who are the organizers of the Brazilian community in Japan, but if you could get them involved in teaching the Brazilians who are in Japan more about these crafts. Maybe you need to get Steve Bimel to do a program for them.
Yes.
Then when they go back to Brazil, they can bring that back.
Yes, I think I have many friends that have gone to Japan for work, and I can see that they live in a parallel reality. Yes, they are. It seems that they are not taking the best of Japan. So this kind of education and connection with traditional craft, arts, and the culture of Japan could be very, very important for their soul.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they would come back, not their lives wouldn't be only for work, just so
That could be a very important.
Could be very important, this kind of connection to Japanese culture.
Maybe you need to do a Akari, Takiakari Festival in the Burmese community in Japan, Brazilian community in Japan.
Yes, I think it would be a good idea. Yes.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to move on to our third speaker, Rosella Menegazzo, who is, I believe, Venetian. Is that so?
Yes.
Which is the ultimate cultural place in the world. She's an associate professor of East Asian art history at the University of Milan and completed her PhD in Oriental Studies at Ca' Foscari University in Venice and at the University of Tokyo. She's participated in numerous international symposiums on Japan design. One of her most recent projects includes Enchanted Worlds Hokusai, Hiroshige, and the Art of Edo, Japan. So could you tell us a little bit about your activities? It seems that you're an expert in Japanese prints. Have you worked also, for example, with modern printmakers? I'd be interested to know how also this connects to Italy.
Thank you, Alex, for the presentation. I start trying to share the, I hope to be able to. Okay, thank you very much. And yes, I'm from Venice, so you know, I'm old. I start from how can I say, a base which is old in itself. So speaking about craft and archaeology is everyday life. But I'm teaching in Milano, so I'm a little bit contemporary in this moment. I decided to speak about design, which is a subject I'm researching on in these last years. So you are right that I started from ukiyo-e, and I'm curating a lot of exhibitions and researching on a lot of collections in Europe about ukiyo-e. But my point of view is always to connect the traditional production to the modern and contemporary production. And so with a view on design, which is my most loved subject. And I start my presentation with a very provoking image, I think, very different from the other two presentations, because I think that when we speak about soft power of Japan, we all think about this kind of animation, manga and kimonos and tattoos. And you see that the example I brought of Orimono are by an American artist and a Venetian artist. You see they performed on the gondola with this tattoo body some years ago, and they are very known and very, how can I say, requested by an international public. That means that also this kind of very colorful Japan is one of the ways that Japan reaches an international public. And the first image is the manga corner that we have at the airport in Milano. And this makes us to understand how much this kind of literature or visual art is spreading among the young public, but not only the young public. Yes, please. Thank you. So I can maybe summarize saying that Japanese culture effects on our lifestyle goes at a double level. One is a more popular ukiyo-e-like, I would like to say, taste. So speaking about kawaii forms, all these anime, manga, cosplay, kimonos, tattoo and fashion production. But there is another very profound and very effective trend, I could say trend, that I call the Zen-like refined taste, which is a more refined taste, which appreciates the monochromatic nuances, simple forms, the void, the natural materials. And here we go on the expressions of design, architecture, and also fashion. So we have this double impact, this double level, touching also different publics, because we have to say that we have different publics following these two kind of Japan, these two Japans. Thank you. And speaking about Japanese design, I think that design represents today the most original and effective expression of Japanese culture, maybe the Japanese-ness in contemporary world. And why this? What people in the Western world, I would say Western, but maybe it's not the right word, in the world appreciate about Japanese design and crafts. And I also would like to avoid this distinction between craft and design, because I think that in Japanese culture, these two terms are mixing and mingling all the time in all the periods. So I think that craftsmanship and know-how, which derived from a long history, as we just said before, and this means the capacity to transform traditional and old techniques in new forms, more adapted to contemporary world. We have high quality of the handmade and the care of details, which all the architects, all the designers in the world confirm about as a Japanese peculiarity. And then we have the use of materials which are very close to nature and to local living, which are derived from a process of adaptation. And so in a sustainability, in a natural meaning of sustainability, which means a natural evolution of man inside the village, inside the seasons, inside the nature and the kind of climate who is living in. And then we have to speak about the capacity to go to the essence of forms, the simplicity, which is one of the most important characteristics, I think, of Japanese design, and maybe also of the use of materials, which is not a superficial form, but is an essence which makes forms form being also substance. And then a unique sensibility and aesthetic of space, the kukan in Japanese, and a sensibility about lighting, about light, and so, which is not light, but should be said about shadow. I think that all these very common, all of us maybe can share this kind of thinking, are peculiarities of Japanese culture and Japanese design expressly. And this is an example. We have the Sennorikyu Chabana vase made of with a piece of bamboo. And then we have this very contemporary chashitsu made by Kita Toshiyuki, who is a designer born in Osaka, living and working in Osaka, but with half of his life in Italy, in Milano. And so we have this share of experience and maybe also a sharing of creativity between Italy and Japan. And so all these qualities inspire Western world and affect our everyday life and landscape, and not only everyday life, but also landscape, because we have some products and spaces, and I mean Western products and spaces, which are imitating Japanese taste and Japanese forms. And maybe this is the most low level of being inspired by Japanese forms. But then we have also products and spaces inspired by Japanese forms, which I'm showing now, and products and spaces derived from the close collaboration of mastery and creativity, Japanese and Westerners. So I would like to share some of these examples. This is a space designed by Amber Road. So we are not in Japan, but maybe all of us can feel something Japanese. What is this Japanese-ness that we can feel? Maybe the roughness of material, the choice of the color, the simpleness of the space, the asymmetry of the spaces, the use of natural material with more constructed spaces and forms. And so maybe we can find in this kind of space also most of the past Japanese architecture, not only products. and the light, which is another point. And this is some other two products made by a designer in Milano. He's working with Orushi and being inspired and loving Japanese culture and design so much that he produced in these last years some pieces which are really very, very Japanese, but in a new way, because they are not a copy, they are not an imitation of Japanese products, but a new interpretation of some traditional techniques, forms, and balances of forms, creating something new. And these are other two examples which are very also funny, because, sorry, the first one, yes, which refer to the most maybe worldly famous techniques from Japan, the kintsugi, which is very fashionable now at the moment. Everybody in Italy, for example, is speaking about kintsugi. You find kintsugi everywhere. All the libraries are full of books on kintsugi. We have hundreds of conferences about kintsugi. Kintsugi is also applied in the hospital as a therapy thinking, and then raku. But you see these kintsugi and raku originals coming to another culture are translated into contemporary objects with a completely different meaning, which is a construction of what in Japanese culture is very natural. And so the meaning, but also the use is completely different, but it's interesting because it's an inspiration, and this becomes a popular way to maybe have an opportunity to present also the original ones. And also fashion, obviously. I couldn't, I can say nothing about this, but you see that fashion goes and see in all countries and watch to Japanese forms and Japanese conception also of the body. So what is interesting is that we have this capacity to bring from Japanese forms and techniques which are traditional, as the folding tradition, which is brought from the past to the present through technologies in Japanese design and from Japanese also shokunin craftsmen. We have a derivation from this also to application to Western products, which is the next slide. Thank you. For example, the lamp that you see in the middle of these images is a derivation from a collaboration between Issey Miyake and Artemide, which is an Italian very famous brand for lighting. And you see this kind of thread that we can see in the application of this origami, of this folding technique, which is old as is Japan, with the application of new technologies, both to textiles, but also to paper, and an application of this common technique to new products, which are derived from a collaboration, so in a new way. So Japanese design comes to the international public, and I brought only maybe a case study, which is the Salone of Design in Milano, the Fuori Salone, which is one of the most big events, I think, on design, international renown, with hundreds and thousands of designers participating every year. And many of them are also Japanese, which means architects, designers, engineers of lighting, or specialized in materials, which are showing, releasing new products, but also new ideas. And also, I think, not only single products, but spatial, how can I say, new conception, wrapping the public in a spatial atmosphere. And I show some images to understand, to explain this, because I think that another peculiarity of Japanese, yes, thank you, of Japanese is not only be able to present contemporary forms linked to the tradition with the foreign public immediately can read and receive, like in this case. Both of these, the tea ceremony chair and the Chasen lamp, were presented in Milano Salone some years ago. But if we go to the next slide, we can see also some other installations that were brought from a big brand of Japanese technology, conveyed to the public through the creation of a space, which is not the product, the projector, or the car, or the plate, or the printer, or the light, but through a kind of space which is Japanese, and people immediately feel that this is a Japanese use of the space and of the light. Also this one. I don't say the brand because maybe it's not good, but you see that all the most traditional feeling of nature, of sakura, of origami, of textiles are brought through technology to present some specific products, but not showing the specific products, but bringing an atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's really fascinating to see the give and take between Japan and Italy. And there are a number of questions that arise. One is, although you can see that, for example, the Chasen chair and the Chasen lamp, and those things are made in Japan.
Yes.
But for example, the light that was the collaboration with Issey Miyake, that's the kind of thing that could only be made in Italy, and you don't see it in Japan. And so one of the issues is that it has been hard for the Japanese traditional craftsmen with all that background in origami and paper and everything else to make the jump into making something that's really super modern and interesting and useful and cool for modern people. And the Italians are awfully good at that. And I kind of wonder whether, is there a rebound? Do these things go back from Italy to Japan?
Yes, this is a big question, and it's a very interesting and I think new field for Japanese craft, not only for design. We have different realities working in this kind of collaboration and promoting this kind of collaboration between Japanese or Italian designers and Japanese or Italian craftsmen. So we have in Milano a friend working on this kind of project, which is having a lot of success because people can find this matching, but you can even read if the project is Italian or is Japanese, but you see these beautiful products, which is the combination of the two creativities. And I think this is one of the interesting points of these two countries, which are so different, but maybe we should collaborate more in this sense to save our craftsmen, because we have the same problem in Italy. When Steve was speaking, I wanted to tell him we have the same problem also with the glass masters in Venice. You know, we have maybe 10 now, and there were hundreds. Oh. And so we don't have people, young people entering the laboratories, and we have a lack of education in this sense, which is also missing. And so I think that this kind of collaboration between countries who have the same sensibility could help each country to revive this kind of local traditions. And I was thinking that maybe some local productions that are not selling in each country could be given to designers and architects constructing and making in another country. This is not impossible. I could construct something in Italy or in Australia or in Brazil using the masters in Kyoto.
Certainly.
With that kind of capacity, know-how, and history. So we are always thinking about craftsmanship inside the local in a local perspective to sell outside, but it's not maybe only a problem to sell outside, but to make more wide the field of making.
And these collaborations, I would imagine that the Italy-Japan collaboration would be really one made in heaven, because both countries have these extremely sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and such a long history of crafts in both places. And so it's kind of wonderful to see, for example, that the Japanese who's working in Milano now with his tea room. And then who was the one that made that red lacquer table? That was
Casa Casati in Italian, designer. He's Emanuele Genuizzi. He lives in Milano and he's an architect, but he loves Japan so much. And he's going to the essence of Japanese aesthetic. So he's not copying, but bringing something which is like Japanese in the perfection, in the care of details, in the use of some materials, but you see in a Western, completely different style.
But I would imagine that the Japanese would love that. That's the kind of thing you can bring back to Japan, I would imagine.
Yes.
Have they tried to do that? Because it's kind of a classic case, really, of I think when you look at world history, of culture going from one country to another and then being transformed and then being brought again in a new form. Do you see many of these collaborations that are done in Italy that may have, it could be a Japanese artist or an Italian working with Japanese techniques coming back to Japan?
There are some. They are not so much in this moment. We have more maybe Japanese coming to Italy than Italian coming to Japan. But the interest in Japanese crafts and design is increasing. And I think that while in the 60s and 70s we had our many Japanese designers coming to Italy, like, Kuramata Shiro working with Sosas, for example, or the Memphis group. Now the Memphis group, who are 60s or 70s in their elder career, are willing to come to Japan. They come to Japan and work to Japan. We have an example now of architect Michele De Lucchi. He was yesterday speaking at the Italian Cultural Center in Tokyo, and he's now working with the Kyoto masters for the renovation of a traditional palace in Kyoto, in Kobe. So for the first time, we have an experience made with an Italian architect who has a know-how about restoration, so recycling, not destroying, to renovate and restore an old hotel with local maestrances, with local masters, which is great, I think. This is another new step, I think, also in that sense, I was saying before.
It's come full cycle, hasn't it? The Japanese to Italy, now the Italians are going back to Japan. I think it's really actually the way to go for a lot of these crafts. And certainly I've seen this with ceramics, that Japanese, we have these Westerners that have come to Japan and they've studied Japanese ceramics, and then they go back to America or to England and they build their own kilns and they do this kind of Japanese style work, but it's not Japan, it's with this different sensibility. The Japanese then see that and become fascinated. And it then comes back to Japan. So I think that's the new world that we live in.
But I think also, and I wanted to say to Steve this to help him in his activity, that one of the difficult point is that people who is also interested in reaching small artisans in Japan are not able to do it. Because of language, because of communication problem, because of the network. They are really difficult to reach directly. So you need somebody in the middle, but it's not easy to find somebody who stays in the middle for this kind of also personal relations.
Precisely. Steve, do you want to say a few words about that?
Yes, one of the things that we are, we are creating this online showcase for our people. That's one of the things we're thinking about. What happens when someone sees that beautiful work and wants to collaborate? So we're creating, we're creating, at least at this point, a lot of information about how to deal with foreign inquiries. How, we're giving them sample letters in English. We're giving them, explaining different things that you need to ask, ways that you need to respond that will enhance the relationship. So we're trying from that level.
Yes.
We are thinking about this. It's very difficult to have a person who would be and let's say a liaison between the two worlds.
Yeah.
But it's, with proper funding, we could do it, but it could be a very expensive thing. Having done that myself, and Alex has done that himself, from being the intermediary between foreigners and Japanese, sometimes can be very, very time consuming.
Yes, I know, because I had the same problem when I was writing my book on Japanese design. I had and the other one of Japanese traditional color through design. I had so many problems in contacting people in Japan. I know I can speak Japanese, I can write, I can contact in any way, but I had no response, no reply. And it was during the COVID, so it was really impossible to reach. And I was so sad about this, because after 20 years of Japan, I realized that it's impossible if you don't come here to be in touch from afar.
It's difficult, and
so
also,
you can imagine another person.
No, it's very difficult, and of course, often, especially people in traditional fields like crafts, they get something from abroad, and even if it's written in Japanese, it's come from another planet, and they panic.
Yes.
And so, you do need intermediaries. And the thing about the intermediaries, as Steve would know and you would know, it's not, and this would be true in Italy too, I think, it's not just about language.
No.
You got to have somebody that understands the culture, that understands the background that something like Venetian glassware came out of, that can put it across and show people the deeper value. And so that's actually another special skill that we have to work on. I'd like to, sorry.
No, and I think it's also a problem of education, of understanding the importance to explain a cultural point of view on each subject, because sometimes we have the same problem when we have some events produced in Japan, brought to Italy, very interesting events, but with no connection with local people that can explain that event.
That's huge.
So it's a waste of time sometimes, and also of money. And I'm always saying this: you have to connect to the person who can explain, introduce people who doesn't know about Japanese culture. Otherwise, it's really a floating satellite. No,
that is absolutely the case. Well, that's where I think Steve plays a growing role, and maybe, and I think you and Sylvia as well. Could I throw the sort of the floor open to some questions from our audience? Do we have any Q&A questions? Anyone that wants to ask one of our speakers? If not, I think our time is kind of coming to an end, but Steve, if you wanted to kind of say a few words.
One similarity I can see in all three cultures, we have products which were sold, century after century, with very little change in product design. And then suddenly we're in a world where the demand from week to week is changing. People who are trained to make these things, to make things century after century, are not necessarily designers. They're great fabricators, but they don't necessarily have design training. And so when we throw them into a world where they're required to be designers, it's really difficult. It's just that's the wrong hat for them. They don't have many of them don't have the skill level. That's where the collaboration between designers, producers, and craftspeople is really important. And that's what, for our contest for 2023, we're really stressing that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you can't design something. Get yourself a designer, collaborate, come up with something spectacular.
Well, on that note, I'm afraid our time is running out. And so I thought I would just say a few words to sort of sum up. I think we've had quite an interesting insight into several things. One, what craft really is, the different types of craft, whether it would be Japanese master craftsmen all the way down to indigenous basket makers in Brazil. There's such a range. Also, these issues, of course, of continuing craft. As Rosella says, apparently they've got the same problem in Venice that we've got here in Japan. So this is a worldwide issue. And these questions of design and collaboration and cultural interlacing, going back and forth. And maybe one final thing that I might kind of leave us to think about, which is Japan's amazing impact culturally on the world today. And Japan has not had it easy economically for the last 30 years. Japan has many problems and faces difficult issues. But the one thing that has happened that's kind of amazed me is this explosion of Japanese influence, and the range is huge. So as Rosella pointed out, at one end, you've got the very colorful manga, wacky, over the top stuff. And then you have at the other end, this very refined Zen minimalism. And then you also have the craft and the design, a theater, kabuki and no drama, music. It's just endless. And so this is really, I think it's the next stage for Japan. To bring these things even more to the world. It's sort of like we're now at a point where the base has been built for it. The tourists are coming. People are starting to know about it. So we're now, I think from now, going to see this impact of Japan really grow. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And thank you very much to all of our webinar participants for this discussion. And thank you also to all of our viewers for joining in with us today. This video of the webinar will be uploaded to the Japan Up Close YouTube channel within the next week, and also to our website at japanupclose.webjapan.org. So thank you everyone for taking part, and everyone please have a good day.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Grazie.
Japan Up Close.